Checking.
There we go.
Yes. There we go.
There we go.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for sticking around for this next panel conversation. My name is Dan Murphy from CNBC. I'm really thrilled to lead such an expert group, and thank you all for being here. As you have just heard, Etna has posed a question to you, so please think about how you'd like to respond. And as we see those results coming in, let me set the scene for this next conversation by saying, I think it's fair to say that we meet at a profound moment in this transition. The world is essentially trying to solve an equation that keeps on getting harder, and that is this. How do we keep the lights on? How do we cut emissions? And how do we make sure that energy remains affordable? And how do we do all of this at the same time? The World Bank reminded us recently that 685 million people still live without access to electricity. Yet the demands on the global grid have never been greater, not just from industry, but also from AI, from data centers, and the next wave of economic growth as well, which has been a key focus on the ground here at FII. So today, our Changemakers panel is going to address who pays for it, who powers it, and who wins the race to lead it. So I think it's fair to say that everyone on this stage today essentially holds a piece of the global energy puzzle: generation, grids, fuels, policy, technology as well. So my first question to the panel is this: what is the hardest trade-off that you face today between energy security, affordability, and sustainability, and can the world achieve all three at the same time? Khalid, you're our Saudi leader on the table, so I'd like to begin with you.
Thank you, Dan. As the only Saudi on this table, I would like to start by welcoming my colleagues to Riyadh. And I hope you are enjoying the great city of Riyadh and enjoying the very interactive, productive, and engaging sessions of FII 9. Back to your question, Dan, I believe there should be no trade-off, only balance. Balancing between affordability, sustainability, as well as resilience. The goal, in my opinion, is not to choose one among the three, but advance all of them together. In Saudi Arabia, we look to these three as interdependent pillars and not competing priorities. If I may start with the resilience and reliability, it is the foundation. And this is why in our company, Saudi Electricity Company, around 60 to 70% of our investment plan goes to the grid. And I always say, no transition without transmission. The same thing applies to affordability. We need to be cost effective so that we can deploy things quickly, but most importantly, to scale it up quickly so the entire nation and the globe can benefit from that. We need also to keep an eye on the sustainability in our sector, because we really want to build something for generations to come. But this balance is not an easy thing to achieve, as we can all imagine. And this is why collaboration among all stakeholders, the policymakers, the technology owners, and we have some of them with us in this table, other operators, manufacturers, is key to drive the success of this energy transition.
Thank you. And before we go to Deputy Secretary Danley, Marco, I'll bring you in next. Marco, what's your perspective on this?
So we like to talk about the energy quadrilemma, not the trilemma, because I think that today with renewables, you do them because not of ideology, but because they're the fastest, cheapest, simplest, sustainable energy. And that's why over the last 15 years, we have reduced emissions by 40% in the power sector. So it's really about speed. And I've learned about speed moving here to the region. Now I've been in the region almost 3 years. In 3 years, we doubled the size of the company, ACWA Power, operating in 15 countries. And today we have over 40 gigawatt of capacity under construction that, to put it in perspective, is like, they were reminding us, almost the total demand of the United Kingdom or Spain. So speed is really important because we don't have time to waste to support the growth of economies in emerging markets. They need to elevate, and they need energy and water, by the way. But also in Europe, where the shift, the attention has shifted from decarbonization and sustainability more to supporting the economy, supporting the industrial production there, we think that also there we can bring through an energy bridge from Saudi Arabia, through power cables or green hydrogen, reliable, secure, affordable power to also decarbonize the hard-to-abate sectors that today have made no progress in the last 15 years.
Deputy Secretary Danley, we're very happy that you're here, and thank you again for joining us. Walk us through the US perspective on this question.
I think that it's empirically demonstrable that if you look at all of the really forward-leaning policies in that trifecta listed, you can have affordability, reliability, or sustainability. You can get 2 out of the 3 maybe, but getting all 3 of them has not succeeded where the policies have been leaned into the most. If you look at Europe, it is a region that has a very unstable bulk power system that's been driven by the over-penetration of intermittence, and the cost is very, very high, right? This has led to widespread deindustrialization, and those countries that used to be the economic powerhouses of Europe, the manufacturing centers, losing a lot of that native capacity. I think it is, as I say, empirically demonstrable. You can't do all 3 of them simultaneously, and though you may have them as goals, reality, physics, engineering will ultimately descend, and the ineluctable realities of engineering will tell you that, in fact, you can only do 2 of 3. The agenda of the White House and the President, Secretary Wright, is to have affordable, reliable, secure energy. Those 3 you can all solve simultaneously. And the objective is to make sure that we have as much energy that is as immediately available, that is to say in the case of electricity, dispatchable generation that can be relied upon in the largest quantity possible for as many people to ensure flourishing of everybody and prosperity.
A very interesting take, and I'm sure there's some on this side of the room who might disagree, so we'll come over to that in just a moment. Greg Jackson, next to you, sir.
I think the missing component is technology. We live in a world in which we've seen computing power grow at such incredible rates that we've each got at least one supercomputer on our body right now. And Moore's law means that the power of computers doubles every 18 months. Many of the technologies of electrification have the same feature. So while solar used to be expensive, it's now cheap and keeps getting cheaper. Batteries have fallen in cost tenfold in 10 years. And then we've had the announcement of new sodium technologies, means they'll fall in cost another 5-fold over the next 5 years. That's a 50-fold cost in less than 15 years. If you combine these technologies, I think it opens up opportunities we never knew before. Now, I think that the question you asked is about security, sustainability, and affordability. So the big mistake we often make is we predict the future based on where we are today. But we need to draw these exponential curves. That's on the generation side. Simultaneously, consumption is changing. In many parts of the world, this is the year that electric vehicles hit price parity with internal combustion vehicles. And because the technologies of electricity keep improving, those costs are now going to keep dropping. And you end up with cars that are cheaper to buy, cheaper to power, and cheaper to maintain. So I think that the fundamentals of energy are changing. But we should be clear, this is different in different parts of the world. The US has tremendous fossil fuel reserves. Some countries don't. Europe, the high cost of energy was down to the gas crisis 3 years ago. And so we've all got to forge different paths, but we need to do so combining insight into these technologies.
Wenchuan.
Yes. In China, it's always, in the grid, there's a topic called the impossible triangle. It's just that you mentioned the 3 topics. So, but China lies on, the first lies in the affordability. So, as you may know, that the new energy generation already covered 30% of the total generation in China already. So, which brings, in the last past 4 years, bring the power price over 40% as well. So it's also caused a problem that causes more pressure to the grid as well. So the policy is like making more advantage into how to transfer into making more of the sustainability. So as I give you the one thing that in Guangdong province in China is the first province that China opened a market transaction for power. So which means that the grid are open more flexibility to the markets and to decide to cut the curve between the peak and the loaded. So which that the market will determine which is to sustain the power and between the load and also the generation. So definitely BAS, just Greg mentioned, the BAS of the cost of the BAS is still lower a lot for the last 3 years as well. So which means there will be more independent BAS, great BAS project will be coming out. So I think they will be transforming from first the solving problem, then to the three triangle as well.
Catherine.
Yeah, I think today renewables represent a massive advantage, whether you look at cost, of course, sustainability, time to market, and I would even add self-dependency. We talked about the energy crisis in Europe in 2022. For sure, the exposure to gas price hit very, very hard the power price in Europe. So renewables gives you some protection. Now, it would be foolish to think that renewables will suffice on their own. You're going to have to complement them with flexible solutions, storage solutions, which is why we are so excited about, of course, the technology, the battery, but also still the gas plants, which are going to play that very important role to bring the flexibility, the reliability in the system. And that's really by building this system of portfolio of technology that we will hit all these objectives that we all have, taking into account that the starting point from one country to another is very different. So every country has to define its path, which would be different from one to the other, and affordability has to be a major objective, because truly, if we don't hit the cost targets, there will be an immense backlash, even against sustainability targets. So I think it's really, really important we hit this sweet spot, and it's going to be a matter of all of these technologies, low-carbon technologies, a bit of flexibility in the system, grid investment, integration of the system is extremely important. And this is true on the generation side, but also more and more on the demand side, where you're going to have to make sure that you build exactly what is needed at the right time for the customers. And if we do all this, we will be able to hit time to market, sovereignty, self-dependency, cost, and sustainability, all of the above. Thank you.
Okay, very interesting. Dr. Owen, over to you next.
All right, so thank you. So interestingly, I think around the table, I am literally the only person who's faced with load shedding on a daily basis, and I live and see the impact of the energy deficiency. So for me, it's not theory, it is practical. I'm from Nigeria, and my company is driving energy transformation. What we are looking at on the continent of Africa is not even so much about whether we're transiting or either of any of the three things that you've said. It's about creating greater access to energy for all. You talked about the numbers. So it would interest you to note that about, I think, 70 or 80% of the numbers that you read are in Africa, which is very disturbing, I believe. Today we hear the world, they are disturbed by the whole concern about immigration. The people that are migrating, they're not migrating because they hate their homes. They're not migrating because they want to leave their family. They're not migrating because they want to leave. They're migrating because they feel they have to. So for us, it's a question of increasing the access to power, driving greater inclusion. Affordability is right up there. And I would also tell you that the numbers we run in Nigeria, renewable is not cheaper for us. The only renewable that today is cheaper is the hydro. And that's just because it's been made a long time ago. The investment is already there. We've got the water. But when I look at the statistics of my country, Nigeria, just 12% of the power that goes to the grid comes from hydro. The remaining is from fossil, gas-fired power plants. And when you also look at the need that we have, Africa needs to scale up on its energy supply quickly. And Africa does have tremendous fossil fuel. We have tremendous sunlight, water, and wind. So we are there, able and capable of harnessing the various energy sources. But if we're looking at speed to closing that gap, we need to pay quick attention to how we are bridging the gap between the capacity that is actually installed on the continent versus what is actually being generated. Today in Nigeria, of the 13 gigawatts of fossil power generated power, available capacity, we are only doing about 51% of it because we do not have enough gas supply despite the reserves underground. We also have a challenge with the grid. The grid today is able to take about 5 to 6 megawatts of power. In a country whereby the total generation, including the independent generators and so, is about 50 gigawatts. The grid is only producing, able to take 5 to 6. You can see the gap. It's huge. And it's something that we all need to be very conscious of and keep in mind in discussions we are having as it relates to the energy conversation. It's really not an either-or. We do need to expand access, look at the various technology, grid and off-grid solutions, mini-grids, to ensure that the continent that has the largest number of young people in the world is included in the conversation, and industrialization is at the core of it.
Thank you, Dr. Owen. Meg, give us the producer's perspective on this.
Sure. So as an oil and gas producer, one of the questions we ask ourselves regularly is what is going to be the demand profile for decades to come, recognizing when we make an investment decision, we're going to be producing a product for 15, 20, 30, or even 40 years. We've got deep conviction around the role of LNG as, in many ways, finding the sweet spot between reliability, affordability, and sustainability. When we talk to customers in places like North Asia and Europe and ask them what they want, they say, we want all three factors. And when we then say, well, what are you willing to pay for lower carbon intensity, the answer is often 0 or near 0. So that has underpinned our focus on LNG. We see LNG as a fuel that has not only been essential for helping those energy-poor nations in North Asia and Northern Europe meet their energy needs for the last few decades, but it will also be essential. And when we look at the forecast, we expect LNG demand to grow 50% over the coming decade. Now, that's as nations tackle all three of these challenges, as nations try to ensure they've got affordable energy to power their economies, as people try to keep the lights on, as developing nations in the world try to get lights in the homes of more people. And India is a great case study as a nation that's really focused on getting power to as many people as they can and trying to lift people out of poverty. And then, the more developed economies are more focused on tackling that sustainability question and the decarbonization question. And again, an energy mix that's renewables plus LNG is a solution that bridges the gap. It's lower emissions intensity than a coal-dominated system, but higher reliability and lower cost than a renewables-dominated system. So, that underpins much of the strategic thinking that we bring to the game as Woodside.
Thanks, Meg. Dr. Wilkinson.
So, Dan, I feel like you're giving me a performance review. We're the pioneers of the World Energy Trilemma. We introduced the framework 20 years ago. But we introduced the framework as a way of encouraging increasingly diverse regions to lead with and learn from each other. The priorities of the trilemma, of course, differ across different regions, across different sectors, across different parts of society. But actually, you can never really get away with it. You might want to think of it as a bilemma, but ultimately the third one will always bite you eventually. Or you might want to think of it as a quadrilemma, but we're very simple creatures, human beings. We seem to be able to have a conversation about three things, but when you put four in the mix, it becomes a little bit more difficult. So what I can tell you is that we measure the World Energy Trilemma across 120 different countries, and we use that not to prescribe, but to encourage plurality. We use it to help people learn and lead with each other. Last year's trilemma indicates that inequality increased across all regions. That is a worrying signal for everybody. And what we do know is the trilemma continues to evolve with technology, with the speed of change, with the need for different ways of collaboration. So we're starting to see how the World Energy Trilemma is moving into a new world energy compass, that security is transforming into a conversation about resilience, that access and affordability have to be couched within a frame of flourishing together, and that the sustainability agenda is not stationary and static, and it's not all about emissions. We now have to have water and biogenic carbon in the mix. So if this is like an Oxford Union debate and you're all against and I'm for, I'm going to say what we need to do is we need to redesign and modernize the trilemma, but let's not let it go.
I love all of the different perspectives on this panel, and this is honestly the best thing about FII and this conference, and that's because it just brings together so many diverse views, and I think that's also being reflected on the board of Changemakers today. So I have some individual follow-up questions for you based on what you have just said. Khalid, I wanted to come back over to you first because we are, of course, speaking in the context of Saudi Arabia in this conversation as well. You've also just taken the helm. Two questions here based on what you've just said. How can the emerging markets achieve energy security while also advancing towards this clean energy future? And what is your first big move to future-proof the grid here in Saudi Arabia now that we see this transition towards technology and in particular artificial intelligence adding to the demand side of this equation?
Well, at Saudi Electricity Company, we are the largest integrated utility company in the MENA region. We own and operate one of the largest integrated power systems globally. And in my opinion, it starts with a very clear and bold vision. And we are part of the energy ecosystem in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, led by His Royal Highness Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman, the Minister of Energy. And yesterday, His Royal Highness laid down our strategy in the energy sector. So we have to be aligned with that overall strategy, which aspires for 50-50 energy mix by 2030, and we are a core enabler for that. So how can we do it? Focusing on the specific priorities and what really matters most. As Dr. Angela said, resilience is critical. Reliability and resilience is the foundation of everything we do. And this is why I said earlier, 60 to 70% of our capital program in the company is deployed to the grid readiness. Not only this, but we are expanding. By 2030, we expect to increase our transmission network by almost 60%, from around 102,000 kilometers of today to more than 160,000 kilometers by 2030. Same thing applies on the distribution side of the business. We expect to increase the distribution network by almost 35%. How can we do it? By focusing on technology, and I totally agree with Greg. Technology is a critical component in this transmission, but Greg, rest assured, we in the Kingdom, we are not missing out that. Actually, we are redefining it, as we heard yesterday, and as we have proved in our path forward. So technology is important so that we have to, as an industry, deploy and employ critical technologies that will help us to meet the future growth and the demand, the like of AI, predictive analytics, digital twins, and many others. And I totally agree with Marco that speed is so critical. And this is why last year during FII 8, we have had no battery storage systems connected to the grid. And today I am very proud to say that during FII 9, we have 8 gigawatt hour connected to the grid in less than 11 months. So speed is important. How can we do that also in the technology side of the business? Automation is critical, and from nearly 4% back in 2020 in our distribution network, we are ramping up quickly to achieve the 40%, which used to be the 2030 plan. We are advancing that. We will be achieving it by 2026. So speed of delivery is important as well. But most importantly, in this delivery and in this transition, partnership. I'm very glad that I'm joining leaders of the world in this session, because we really cannot achieve it in our own. You mentioned that priorities are different. Grid is critical in the mix, which I totally agree with. So the priorities should be aligned, and the collaboration, in our opinion, will drive the success. We should not only invest in the assets for the assets to be more reliable and more resilient, but also we are investing in the confidence. And as we heard yesterday from His Excellency the Chairman, from the speakers, the businesses here, we are welcoming the entire world with open arms and hearts to come and invest, because we really value and partner the collaboration and the investment together.
Just on this topic of technology, Greg, I'll have you respond to that as well, because you have said that technology can do for energy what the internet did for media. Expand on that for me, and can you respond to what Khalid's just said?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, in many ways, the way most of our grids are run in the world is a bit like the way minicabs, taxis, used to be run before Uber. So we have people dispatching power. And in a world where you have millions of generating points with rooftop solar, distributed generation, you're balancing with flexible gas, you may have some base load and some nuclear, and you're increasingly changing the way you consume. Air conditioning is the single biggest new source of load. You have very concentrated power in data centers, and then you have things like electrification of industry and transport. All of these things together mean we have to move our grids to be more digitized so that they can rapidly respond to the changing supply and demand at any moment in time. More importantly, they need to be able to forecast the generation and the demand. And then increasingly, they can use price signals and AI to shift that demand around so that we flatten the peaks. After all, every bit of grid, every single bit of grid has to be built to handle the peak load. If we can shift some demand or some generation and reduce those peaks, we can get more and more of our existing grids and make our new investments more effective. I think it's a little bit like, in the background, when we're watching Netflix, the data that is making the way from Netflix servers to your screen is being buffered and shifted, stored and reproduced. You don't notice it, but it means you get incredible entertainment very cheaply. And in the same way, we can manage our electricity grids to mean we get electricity that's increasingly cheap and sustainable. As consumers, we won't notice it, but as an industry, we can generate it.
We do have a number of nations represented on stage as well, of course, the US, China, and Europe. So I wanted to dig into some of these geopolitical fault lines as well. Catherine, I think you're well placed to speak about this because, of course, Europe certainly in the headlines here. Europe's transition ultimately being tested by two things. Number one, war, but more recently as well, inflation, given rising costs. So how do you maintain profitability and business continuity when customers are ultimately demanding both clean energy and lower bills?
Yeah, and especially in a world where we can anticipate additional burden on demand of the power, given, for example, AI, when some of these data centers are being discussed, 1 gigawatt, what does that mean? It's like immediately putting online a big city of several thousand, hundreds of thousands of people overnight that is going to consume power. So what effect will that have on the power price of the citizens? So the pressure is very hard. What we're trying to do is really staying the course by deploying this system that I mentioned with renewables and storage, and really finding the path of lowest cost solutions that we can bring. The two things that are really important is clarity on the framework, stability, and of course, size of the project. When I look at the region here and I comment the Vision 2030, we're seeing that in a few countries. In India, for example, you mentioned it, there is a very clear target, 500 gigawatts in India by 2030. That gives you the stability that you need to be able to invest, not just on one project, but a series of projects. And this is how you get costs down. That's very important. Stability of the framework all this investment is CapEx investment. The returns are not extraordinary. That's the reason we are able to be affordable and to find solutions that are affordable for the citizens and for the states, so that we don't depend too much on subventions. That's not what we're here to do. But for that, you need the clarity, and we need, of course, the size. And here the region is advantage because you are able to do incredible projects very fast. Europe is a bit more challenged. It's very difficult to get permits. The projects are smaller, so you need to work even harder in Europe to make it affordable. On the other hand, Europe does stay the course in terms of climate goals and renewables targets, and that gives us the visibility. Most places, there are exceptions, but in most places we have the visibility, and that's what allows us to action all these levers that I have mentioned in order to develop this as low cost as possible energy system. And again, the dependency on gas is important for Europe, particularly those countries who don't produce natural gas. Once you've installed this renewable project, you don't depend on import price anymore. So while we'll never completely be phasing out of gas, at least not in the foreseeable future, it does protect some price protection against volatility. And to talk about price in general, in absolute terms, the predictability of price is also very important for our industrial customers. What they want, obviously, they want low price, but they want the certainty, the visibility. We always go back to that. At ENGIE, we invest roughly 8 billion a year on gross capex. So this is capital allocation machine, and for that, you need the stability. And this is really the decisions that we make on a daily basis, is where do I put my capital to develop this system? Stability, stay in the course, not changing, objectives all the time. That's very, very important feature we'll be looking at in order to help and develop the system of tomorrow.
And of course, Europe has done a commendable job of weaning itself off Russian supply, diversifying its source, gas, LNG, for example. But at the same time as well, I want the US perspective on this, because we have just seen a fresh round of sanctions being leveled towards the Russian producers. Why haven't the US sanctions stopped Russia's war?
Well, market forces still exist. I mean, the reality is it's the very demand for energy that I'm talking about that drives that. The entire world is experiencing rapidly rising demand. It's going to be satisfied one way or another. The hope is that it's done so as much as possible with responsible counterparties. The objective of the President's policy of affordable, reliable, secure energy is one that basically sounds in energy abundance. And the objective here is to make sure that energy scarcity, otherwise known as expensive energy, is not the retardant that obstructs the development of AI or manufacturing or any other industrial undertaking. The hope is that we're going to be able to live in a world that is peaceful and engages in as much trade as possible on fair terms with as many counterparties as we can. And referring back to the previous discussion that was up here on the stage, that agenda of affordable, reliable, secure is really an America First energy policy, but that doesn't mean America alone, right? We've doubled our LNG export capacity. We're going to double it again. We're right now at about 13 BCF, and it's going to double again in the next few years. The objective is for us to make our energy as available as possible to everybody, displacing more expensive, less reliable forms. And the hope is that we have as many sources of energy available to as many people as possible for that prosperity. And in fact, on the subject of technology, we're hoping that we're going to be able to see us be able to crack the code on safe and affordable SMRs. If we have that available for deployment, that too can satisfy the ever-rising demand. But at this point, all we know is that the demand signal is rising. We do not know what the ceiling is, and so there is real urgency in getting as much real power delivered as quickly as possible to everywhere that needs it.
Just quickly on sanctions, what is the next lever that Washington can pull without causing a price spike?
I'm sorry, you're going to have to say that again?
What is the next lever that Washington can pull without causing a price spike?
Well, I mean, the levers are to make as much American energy available to everybody to keep the prices down. And there's also simply the bully pulpit in which we try to get all of our friends and allies to engage in the same policy of abundance that we have.
Okay, thank you. Also wanted to quickly get the Chinese perspective too, because of course, China is both a significant producer, but also consumer of energy as well. So when you think about this question, Winshuan, what does the world still misunderstand about China's energy transition?
Well, that's a big topic. So I think the biggest misunderstanding about the China transition now is just talk to Dr. Angela, that I think before 5 years, the China, all the energy section of the players is meant for SOEs. So it's not like us, the private sectors, the young generation can participate in it. So before 5 years, the energy section in China is a kind of the exclusive market. Only a few people play in it. So SOEs building more of the generation, and grid building more of the connections of the transmission as well. But definitely we have the commitment for the 2030 and then 2035. Then a lot of the new energies generations are coming up, like I just mentioned. In past 5 years already, actually we finished the presidency's the commit to 2030. So there's another double of the generation to be established in next 10 years. So which means that we'll be more open for the markets. So as we may see that a lot of foreign players are jumping into China market to play in the market transaction for electricity power as well, like ACWA, like several of the foreign companies, and also they're giving us giving the young generation the private sections, the private entities to participate into this big market. So I think this is the first misunderstanding. And then as the second is the policy is not the only because energy is a very complicated issue. So it's not only the players in the energy sectors, and also we see the financial policies also. So before 5 years, the energy project, new energy projects is called projects. Even banks can now giving loans to this kind of projects. You can getting into finance from the leasing company. But within these 5 years, banks are giving more loans to the project as well. And for us as a private entity, we are successfully to issue the first rates about the CNI assets into the China markets. So it's not only the energy section, and also the financial sections are helping this the market to grow more marketized. So I think this is the two parts that moving the policy are very recognized that there are new generation growing, and also the new generation for the new energy are adding more pressure to the grids. And how to solving this problem is like to become more marketized and to make more people participating in it. This will be a huge of the policy change in the next 5 to 10 years in China.
Very interesting to watch. I want to thank our board of changemakers for this really insightful conversation. I wish we had more time, but we'll have to leave it there. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a round of applause, and thank you for joining in today.